I bet you didn't know the true story behind the Chernobyl disaster. Imagine a quiet night at a nuclear power plant where everything seems under control. Suddenly, a reactor explodes, unleashing a deadly cloud of radiation that would devastate not only the plant but affect entire continents. This is the story of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Inside Reactor 4, heat built up to dangerous levels, and when the workers realized what was happening, it was already too late. The explosion blew the 1,000-ton reactor lid off, launching deadly radioactive material into the air. Fires ignited immediately, with smoke billowing out into the night sky. The intensity of the blast was unimaginable. The radiation levels were 400 times higher than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. At first, the plant's workers had no idea of the scale of the disaster. Many of the first responders, firefighters, plant operators, and engineers who rushed to contain the fires were unknowingly exposed to lethal levels of radiation. Many would die within weeks due to acute radiation sickness, while others would suffer long-term health problems. Authorities in the nearby city of Pripyat were slow to respond. The 50,000 residents were not evacuated until 36 hours after the explosion, by which time radiation had already spread through the air, affecting thousands. Children played outside, and people went about their daily lives unaware of the deadly radioactive cloud forming over them. As the world began to realize the scale of the disaster, Soviet authorities scrambled to contain the fallout. It wasn't until April 28th, 2 days later, that the rest of the world learned of the catastrophe when radiation detectors in Sweden detected unusually high levels. The international community demanded answers, and the Soviet Union could no longer hide the truth. The following days saw a desperate attempt to contain the reactor. Helicopters dropped sand, lead, and boron onto the burning reactor to slow the release of radioactive particles. Thousands of workers, known as liquidators, were called upon to clean up the site, risking their lives to prevent further contamination. The long-term effects of the disaster were devastating. An estimated 5 million people were exposed to high levels of radiation. The immediate area around Chernobyl became a radioactive exclusion zone, with Pripyat and nearby towns abandoned, turning into ghost towns overnight. The environmental impact was severe, with forests turning red from radiation exposure, wildlife mutating, and rivers becoming contaminated. Even decades later, the effects of the disaster are still being felt. Thousands of cases of cancer, particularly thyroid cancer in children, have been linked to the radiation exposure from Chernobyl. The area remains uninhabitable, and scientists estimate it will be unsafe for humans for the next 20,000 years. The Chernobyl disaster is not just a story of tragedy, it's a warning. It highlighted the dangers of nuclear energy when safety measures are overlooked, and it exposed the flaws in how governments manage such crises. The brave individuals who worked to contain the disaster are remembered as heroes. But the lessons from Chernobyl echo through history as a reminder of how dangerous and unpredictable nuclear power can be.